Welcome to today's painting tutorial. We're going to be painting this pretty river scene in oils. The picture that you can see will be the final painting. You can use any opaque paint, such as acrylic or poster paint or oils, whichever you have, or even gouache. The colours from top left to right are titanium white, lemon yellow, yellow ochre. On the second row, cadmium red, crimson alizarin, violet grey and permanent mauve. On the third row, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, French ultramarine and primary cyan. And the last colour is sap green. You can see the outline of the bridge in pencil, and I've drawn some bushes and a couple of buildings. To make it easier to see these, I'm going to paint the outline of all the objects in the picture. So I'll start off with the building on the right hand side, and I've made a sandy colour using titanium white and yellow ochre. You can see that it's got a pitched roof and a small chimney. I'm also doing a similar shaped building on the left. Now I'm adding some shading on the right hand side, now a bit on the left. These lines are the wall of the riverbank. This is the widest point, and then the river narrows as it curves around in the distance. Notice the angle of these lines. For the trees and the bridge, I'm going to use a light blue. So I'm just going around the bushes that are in front of this house here, and now some of the trees and bushes in the distance. I'm using a bit of ceruleum blue. It doesn't matter which colour you use for this because we'll paint over it later. For the trees, I'm not painting the top half of the branches until we've painted the sky colour. This will make it easier to fill in the clouds and then add the branches on top later. Now we're painting the top of the bridge. We'll fill in the colour later. I'm using a silicone tool and mixing some white, some yellow ochre and a bit of lemon yellow, and this will be for the start of the sky just above the trees. You can use a flat brush or the silicone tool. This is easier to clean. I'm now applying some white paint and spreading it along using a soft round brush. For the top half of the sky, I'm using a mix of Coeruleum Blue and white, and a little Cobalt Blue, which is the second one along. We're going to work our way across the top of the canvas using this mix of blues and white, and do downward strokes to blend with some white below to create the effect of clouds. Making more of the same mix as necessary when we're running a bit low. I've switched to a larger filbert brush to blend the blue and white. If you just have one brush, be sure to clean it before each new application of colour. I'm also dabbing some of the white in the blue above to make the appearance of a thin layer of cloud. For the river, I'm going to make a background colour using white, Coeruleum Blue and a little lemon yellow. I've also got some liquid, my drying medium, mixed in to help the paint flow better. You might wish to use some linseed oil or similar. Now that we've painted the water with the first layer, I'm going to use some of this green for the grassy bank, and I'll add some lemon yellow to make it a lighter shade, a more vibrant colour. Using the darker shade of green to make the grass further down the river and also on the bank on the left hand side. Now we're going to work on some of the trees, so I'm adding some lemon yellow for the highlight on this one, and then I'm making a green, and then I'm making a new colour using white and French ultramarine. Now I'm adding some more white and a little lemon yellow to make a light green colour. This is quite a light mix, and it's going to be used for the trees in the distance. I'm making a jagged edge, not too distinct or detailed. I'm using light and darker tones for contrast, with the darker areas near the base of the tree and the lighter areas further up. Now I'm mixing crimson and white and a little permanent mauve, and I'm creating a new colourful tree just in front. Adding a little more crimson and a touch of yellow ochre. Now some white moving towards the top of the tree using short diagonal strokes, and this tree will be darker near the base. I'm using this colour as the bottom layer for the next tree. It's shaped a bit like a cone. Now making a mix of white and primary cyan. Now mixing in a touch of yellow ochre, a little cobalt blue, a bit of primary cyan with the green mix to make a new bush in front of the trees. For the tree on the left, I'm using some primary cyan. I'm using the original green mix and white. Using a similar technique, short diagonal strokes to fill in this area. And the darker green at the bottom in the shadow, and this makes it stand out against the highlight of the tree in front. So I'm making a building, some permanent mauve and violet grey mixed with the crimson mix and a touch of French ultramarine. And this is for the roof, not forgetting a small chimney. To make it more of a grey colour, I'm adding in some green mix and whiter nearer the top of the building. I'm going to add some dark shadow to the water's edge on the left using primary cyan and some French ultramarine. Using the small round brush, I'm doing sideways strokes for the reflections and the ripples in the water. I'm adding a touch of lemon yellow to make a green tint. A little shading at the top of the river where it narrows and goes around a bend. Some shading on the right hand side, leaving a gap in the middle for some lighter areas. I'm adding some of the drying medium to help the paint to spread a little to fill in the gaps. Reflection of the bridge in the water using the darker tones, starting with the bridge supports and doing a slight curve for the arches, allowing for the movement of the water and the ripples. I'm leaving some areas under the arch for some lighter tones. Now doing the left hand side of the river, adding a touch of yellow ochre, and this is making a dark green hue, extending to the widest point, making some dark shadow for the reflection of the wall, some greenery and some buildings. I'm going to make some random dark areas in the water. I'm doing little sideways strokes. Some of them are more curved. Eventually, we'll cover the whole of the river using different tones, different greens and blues. colour under the bridge. Using the permanent mauve and the blues, this is going to create a greater contrast between the light and the dark areas. I'm not doing one solid block of colour, I'm leaving some of the lighter tones from underneath to show through. Using yellow ochre, lemon yellow, white and the blues, I'm creating a green colour to go on the shadow under the bridge. A little more primary cyan. Now that we've given most of the water a coat of one or more colours, I'm adding a bit of permanent mauve for interest, and this could be the reflection of some purple bushes and trees in the foreground, the ones that you can't see that are out of sight. I'm going to add some lemon yellow and white for the highlights in the water, the reflection of the sun. colour for the bridge, I'm going to mix some Cobalt Blue and white, and this will be the base colour. I'll then add some violet grey, permanent mauve and crimson in varying quantities. I want the top colours to be a little bit patchy to give texture and interest, so firstly I'm adding some violet grey around the arch and under the top of the bridge. I'm using primary cyan to darken both ends of the bridge on the left and the right, mixed with some crimson and some permanent mauve, and not forgetting the use of white and lemon yellow for the highlights. I'm using a small filbert brush to create the darkest shadow for the bridge under the arch on the left hand side of each one. Using Sap Green and French Ultramarine, I can create some dark shadow on the left bank close to the bridge. The lemon yellow will lighten this end and the middle. I'll also create some dark shadow on the right bank. Adding some yellow ochre to sap green for a different shade. I'm applying it using a slightly larger filbert brush. For the riverbank in the distance, adding some French ultramarine, I'll make a darker area closer to the water, leaving a lighter area on top, and not forgetting to do darker shading under the bushes and the trees on the left-hand side. Because the stone wall is in the shade, I'm using violet grey, permanent mauve and a bit of the green mix. And for the wall on the right, I'll include some yellow ochre for a sandy tone. A little bit of primary cyan down here, mixed with crimson, and the same mix will go next to the bridge on the wall. For the tarmac or paved area, it's mostly in shadow, so I'll use a violet grey mix and white, and that's almost a bluey grey colour, and that will go down here on the left. There'll be a few highlights that we'll make using white and the yellows. For the right, it's mostly in the sunshine, so I'm going to make a sandy colour using cadmium red, yellow ochre and white, and this will go down here. I'll add some shadow to the building on the left. And we mustn't forget to fill in the roof. I'm also doing a small window and a little chimney. And for the house in the distance, I'll just hint at some windows. Now for some blues and a bit of green. For the dark area, it's a dark tree in shadow behind the tree next to the house. There's a bit of shade on the ground. some highlights on the bridge, adding some primary cyan under the arches of the bridge to enhance their shape. I'm going to fill in the bushes and trees on the left, using the darker greens for the shadow, the lighter greens for the mid-tone, and the yellowy greens and yellow for the highlights, with some white. I'm going to try and vary the colours between each tree to give some interest. some crimson and yellow ochre in the mix to make a different colour. The tree on the left is made using a brown, using cadmium red, yellow ochre, green, a bit of primary cyan, and it's a trunk that divides in two. The tree has two main branches and a few smaller ones, not too elaborate. Now doing some shading for the building on the right. The tree on the right hand side will have a much wider trunk and many more branches, and the tree is in the foreground as this is a focal point. I'm using the yellow ochre mix for highlights on the left-hand side of the tree. Using some crimson to give some shape to the trunk of the tree. The end of the building is in the shade, so we'll add some darker colour, such as the violet grey. Adding a little blue to the violet grey and permanent mauve for the roof on this house. Some bushes in front of this building. These can have more colour to give it a more vibrant feel for some flowers. The shadow for the trunk of this tree has been made in layers using crimson and then some French ultramarine on top. For the shadow created by the branches, I'm going to use French ultramarine. I'm just doing a few leaves on this tree. I've got a pointed chisel tool. I'm starting with a light blue for the leaves. I'll add a darker green and a bit of yellow, but not too much, so that it doesn't detract from the main picture. There you have it, the finished painting. Whether you've painted along or merely watched, I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial and will join me again soon. Thank you.